Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Jake, Politics by Jake, and this is The Long War, Part 4, Episode 1, the Second Bill of Rights, and the Battle for the American Future. And as I said, welcome to the show. Let's begin. We begin with a simple truth. Some conflicts in history are not about borders. They are about the future of freedom itself. And Ukraine is one of them. Because Vladimir Putin, a man raised in the fist of the KGB, as it were, a man who learned intimidation before he learned ethics, a man whose entire worldview is soaked in empire and in grievance, has chosen Ukraine as the hill he dies on. Not Russia. I don't think Russia would particularly do this, but Putin. Russia historically is an empire in motion. It expands the way a wildfire spreads, unpredictably, destructively, without regard for what it consumes. From Catherine to Stalin to today, and really even before Catherine, back to Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible, the pattern is the same. They take, they absorb, they devour. And now, once again, they want land that is not theirs. And I realize you may think that this is a strange statement, but believe me, I'm going to show you. And into this walks Donald Trump, our Mikey, who the Republican fascists who stand behind him know will do anything, just like Mikey will eat anything. A man who, God help us, represents the most powerful nation on the earth, telling President Zelensky that he must give up Donetsk, that he must be realistic, and that he should surrender the land his people died to defend. This isn't realism. This isn't diplomacy. This is moral rot. This is the detached cruelty of a man who has never understood sacrifice because he has never made one. You see, Trump doesn't understand ordinary people. He doesn't understand what it means to love your country enough to defend it. He thinks the people who lie buried in the graves in Europe were suckers and were fools. He certainly doesn't understand what it means to face down a war criminal because let's call it out and face it and say what it is. That's what Putin is. He's a war criminal. And let me put it plainly, if that wasn't plain enough. Nuremberg, it was created for men like Hitler and men like Goering and men like Putin. And that's the line history will remember. And this? Well, this is Politics by Jake. And we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake. And this is The Long War, Part 4. And let's step back, shall we, from Nuremberg, although we're going to come back to it. We're going to talk a lot more about Nuremberg, but let's step back from it for now. Let's step back from Ukraine. Let's step back from Zelensky and Trump, well, for the moment, and Putin. And let's step back from the brutality of the present to the blueprint of the past. The date was January 11th, 1944. Franklin Delano Roosevelt stands before Congress in the twilight of World War II and tells them something extraordinary. He makes this shining statement, this incredibly necessary statement to make, this incredibly revolutionary statement to make, but it was simple. He said, necessitous men are not free men. Now, that wasn't poetry. That was prophecy. Because FDR understood something that we today have been taught to forget, too easily to forget. You cannot be politically free if you are economically shackled. You cannot be a citizen if insecurity governs your life. And so what did he do? Well, he proposed a second Bill of Rights. And I've talked about these rights before on the show, but I'm going to talk about them again. The right to a useful job, not just making widgets, although the argument could be made that you go and you make widgets because people must have their widgets, but a useful job. And not only a job in the gig economy at sub-minimum wage or even at minimum wage, but the right to earn enough to live. And what that means, to live, not merely exist. The right to medical care, the right to education, the right to housing, decent housing, not some ramshackle claptrap shack. The right to security in old age, the right to dignity, the right to not be crushed by collapse. These weren't socialist fantasies either, although the fascist right would very much want to portray them at all times as such. This is nonsense. These were constitutional extensions rooted in the quiet clause we overlook, the Ninth Amendment. And what does the Ninth Amendment say? The Ninth Amendment says, just because a right isn't listed, it doesn't mean you don't have it. Oh, FDR saw the path all right. He saw that democracy couldn't survive on political rights alone. He knew that it needed economic rights, pillars that hold the republic upright. He saw what scarcity does, and he was a rich man. He saw what desperation does, and he saw what demagogues do to hungry people. And he tried to close the breach before the next dark age could seep through, as he inevitably, unquestionably knew it would. But we didn't listen. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the court, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left? You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this collapse protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. Now, we're going to go back again. Not to 1944, but we're going to go back about 2,000 years. We're going to go back to Rome. Because, Rome is always the warning label on the box. People think the Roman Republic collapsed under emperors and marbles and legionaries, and I would say that that would be wrong. It collapsed when politicians learned how to weaponize hunger. The Roman Annonā, which was the grain supply, came largely from North Africa. And those ships, they were oxygen to Rome. If the grain fleets arrived, the city breathed. If they were delayed, diverted, or withheld, the city panicked. And ambitious men abused that pressure point. They knew it, they saw it, and they abused it. Senators, governors, would-be strongmen, these guys learned that they could withhold grain just long enough to create desperation and then step forward as the savior. This is the birth of political scarcity. This is the moment a republic becomes vulnerable. Because hunger is not just a physical state, it's a political instrument. And Rome created an entire office called the Praefectus Annonā, the prefect of the Annonā, because they knew control the food supply and you control the people. So now, let's return to modern America. 42 million Americans nearly lost SNAP because one Supreme Court justice allowed the regime to withhold payments while the case worked its way through the system. And that was Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I suppose that that was one of the prices that she had to pay for her associate justiceship. But, I mean, come on, Ketanji. You know, perhaps better than most, starvation does not work its way through the system. This wasn't a bureaucratic hiccup, it was a test. It was a test, just like QAnon was a test in 2020 and 2021. Just like January 6, 2021 was a psychological operation, a psyop foisted upon the people of the United States to see how they'd react. And that's what this was. It was a controlled burn. It was a stress analysis. It was a political experiment in deprivation. And the lesson? Oh, and there was a lesson, all right. And authoritarian factions learned it. You know what the lesson was? They'll tolerate it. That's the modern Roman moment. And if you understand Rome, you understand what comes next. So FDR building the scaffolding for an America where dignity was a right, not a luxury. But after the war, something happened, a counter-revolution. Neoliberalism arrived like a Trojan horse, and neoliberalism is not what it sounds like. But it promised efficiency, it promised, and it delivered, honestly, inequality. And bit by bit, decade by decade, wages stagnated, corporate power metastasized, social safety nets were shredded, public goods were privatized, the working class was redefined as an expendable class. Hamilton, John Jay, Madison, they understood class conflict. They wrote the Federalist Papers, knowing full well already the dangers of concentrated wealth. They weren't blind to tyranny. They were students of it. But modern America turned its back on the doctrine. We chose the markets over humanity. We chose austerity over stability. We chose scarcity as a policy. And the media, the corrupt, controlled corporate media, well, it played its role. Shove the ultra-left onto the screen to frighten moderates. Defund the police. Yeah, that'll scare them. That'll scare most moderates. Frighten moderates so that the right gets elected, and the right serves the corporations who own the media. That's why I called it corrupt. That's why I call it controlled. And that's why I call it corporate. Because it's what it is. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a design. And it's why we are where we are. So now let's return to the hammer, because everything I've described, the abandonment of FDR, the rise of scarcity, the Roman warning, it all converges in one place. Trump's America. And I want to be direct here. Trump isn't an architect of authoritarianism. He's not even the designer. Trump is a puppet. He's a vessel moved by darker minds. Minds like Steve Bannon, a chaos engineer, Stephen Miller, who was a fascist by the time he was 14, Pete Hegseth, who told generals their job was to break things and kill people, Russell Vought, the architect of the weaponized federal purge. These aren't thinkers. These are fanatics. And when Hegseth saw an operation where combatants were double-tapped after they were neutralized, that is a war crime under the Nuremberg standard. Nuremberg changed everything. It carved a new category into human law. Crimes against humanity. Not just crimes of war, crimes against life itself. And withholding food from 42 to 45 million people, I forget which one it is, but it's one of those. Let me say it clearly. That's a crime against humanity. And this is why the SNAP crisis that we just so recently went through matters. It was not a budget dispute. It was a message that the fascist right, living under the tent, ostensibly of republicanism, sent to the Democrats and to the people. And this is the message. We can starve you if we want to. And every authoritarian in history has known a hungry nation is an obedient nation. So where does this leave us? At the crossroads between dignity and domination, between the republic the founders imagined and the empire the strong men crave. The Ninth Amendment is the hinge. It tells us rights do not end where the text ends. The people hold the reservoir of liberty. FDR took that seriously. He tried to write those rights down. He tried to build a republic where dignity was non-negotiable, and we abandoned that vision, and we are paying the price. But the path forward isn't complicated. We restore economic freedom. We restore political freedom. We restore the republic. And Ukraine is fighting for this truth on the battlefield. We're fighting for it at the ballot box, and if we fail, scarcity will rule us. The benefits and the blessings of the agriculture of the American economy that blesses not only the American economy, but blesses the world economy, will rule us. Fear will shape us. Strong men will divide us. But if we remember who we are, well, then the long war, the war for the American soul, finally turns. Because in the end, republics don't fall when tyrants rise. Republics fall when citizens forget their own worth. And we're done forgetting. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back with part 4 of the long war. But you know what's wild? Everything FDR warned about, everything he feared would follow if we abandoned the economic foundation of democracy, it all happened. He said, a nation of insecure people becomes a nation ruled by fear. A nation, he opined, ruled by fear, becomes a nation that is easy to manipulate. A manipulated nation becomes the raw material of tyranny. So I ask you, look around. Look at medical debt. It's not a burden, it's a leash. And $880 billion, unless something happens, is due to be taken away from the American people over 10 years. This will assuredly increase medical debt. And it will create a terrible anxiety and a terrible fear and a terrible insecurity among the people. Let's look at housing insecurity. It's not just stress, it's strategic immobility. Gig work? Come on. Gig work isn't a lifestyle. It's the erosion of citizenship disguised as freedom. Because when your life is unstable, you're not marching, you're not volunteering, you're not organizing, you're not voting, because you're too busy surviving. And that's how democracies die, not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet exhaustion. And this is what FDR understood deeply. He understood this. Liberty without stability is a poem, not a government. Rights without foundations are just decorations. They're not protections. And the Ninth Amendment, the most misunderstood, other than the second, underused, uncelebrated line in the entire Constitution is the bridge that connects the founders to FDR. The founders said, because this is what the Ninth Amendment says, the people have more rights than we are listing here. FDR said this. Let's define some. And today I say, let's reclaim them. But let's talk some more about Rome. There's another layer to Rome. There's a deeper one. Rome did not simply allow hunger to become political, it professionalized it. It was the praefectus Annonā, the prefect of the Annonā, the official who oversaw the grain supply. This wasn't a minor bureaucrat. This was one of the most powerful positions in the Republic and in the Empire. And why? Because controlling the food supply meant controlling public order, it meant controlling elections, it meant stability, it meant loyalty, it meant controlling the food of the masses. You know the phrase bread and circuses? You know what that is in Latin? Panem et circenses. That's where it comes from. Bread, panem, and circenses, circuses. Oh yeah, the mood of the masses, that's important. If the grain fleet was delayed, the city rioted. This happened with Nero. Some have talked about the fact that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. It is true that there was a fire during Nero's reign, but there was more a situation that the grain fleet was basically destroyed in the sea and didn't arrive when it was supposed to arrive. And the city rioted. It rioted. If the grain fleet was diverted, politicians fell, and Nero fell. If the grain fleet was withheld, entire political factions collapsed. That's how fragile the Republic, well, Nero is the empire, but that's how fragile the situation was. Rome learned from the darkest political truth in human history. You don't need armies to control people. You just need their stomachs. And here's the parallel that no one wants to admit. Modern America, it has its own grain fleet. It's SNAP. It's WIC. It's Social Security. It's Medicare. It's Medicaid. And it's state-level food programs. Interrupt those, delay those, withhold those, politicize those. You don't need tanks. You don't need soldiers. You don't need decrees. You can bring a nation to its knees with a bureaucratic pause. While the subject wends its way through the system. Thank you, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Oh, the wisdom that you deliver from on high. Yes, we're just going to let 45 million people starve while the topic wends its way leisurely through the judicial system. Golly, that just sounds so nice. I feel like I want to frame that. Let the people starve while the topic wends its way leisurely through. I like that. I really like that. Of course, I'm joking. And that's what the regime just tested. Just like Rome. And just like Rome, the test worked. Because that's the thing that brought the Democratic opposition to heel. Because they were horrified to know that there were forces that would actually do that to 45 million Americans. And they caved. Well, they said, okay, we'll do it, but we need to have a vote, and that vote is coming up. And the Republicans promised that. But they were horrified by the prospect of the abomination that was going to occur, that the Republican Party, and this is the fascist right, you understand, they're under the tent of the Republican Party, but they are not Republicans, they are not conservatives. They are either fascists or they're reactionaries who are willing to go along with fascists. And they saw that they were willing to do that to the people, and they had more humanity than that. And so they relented, and they caved. And like I said, that's what the regime tested. It's just like Rome. And just like Rome, the test worked because the people were afraid. Fear is the currency authoritarianism trades in. And they used it against good men who didn't want this to happen to the people and who had a modicum, a sense of sanity, a sense of mercy, and a sense of compassion for their own people, which these fascists don't have. They don't have it. And we'll talk about what it is that they don't have more coming up in later shows, because we're going to visit this again and revisit it. And so let's take a break, and we'll be back with more of part 4. And this is Politics by Jake.
Look around you. The systems are failing. The currency, the court, the Constitution. And no one is coming to save you. You feel it. You see it. But you've been told to ignore it. This isn't paranoia. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's collapse. Designed, accelerated, and now unavoidable. So what's your plan? What happens when the banks close? When the grid goes down? When they come knocking and you have nothing protected, nothing structured, nothing left? You don't need a bunker. You need a protocol. The collapse protocol is the plan for people who still think clearly, who want to live, thrive, and protect what's theirs, even in a world gone mad. You don't have time. You don't have backup. But now you have this. Collapse Protocol from Twain Consulting before the end begins. Contact us as soon as you can. Facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call us at 213-465-0639.
All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back with more of part 4 of The Long War. And welcome to the show. Now, we're going to move around a bit. Let's talk about Vladimir Vladimirovich. That's Putin. And I mean, if you want to understand Putin, and I mean truly understand him, you cannot look, and this is something that Americans don't understand, and that I and other historians, philosophers and students like me, we need to be telling you, and I am doing it, and there are others out there like me who are doing it as well. But you can't look, if you really want to understand him, you can't look at 2022, you can't look at 2014 when they took over Crimea, or you can't look at the fall of the USSR. You have to go back to 1510. You have to go back to a monk named Philotheus, who coined the doctrine that Moscow is the third Rome. And here's the doctrine in its pure form. Two Romes, he wrote, have fallen. A third stands. There will not be a fourth. What does this mean? Well, you have Rome in the city of Rome. You have Rome, the Italian city of Rome. That's Rome. That was the first Rome. And that Rome fell, and that's the western half of the empire. The eastern half still existed. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. But you have Rome, the Western Empire, falling, basically, and there's an argument that can be made on this, that the empire actually fell. That the empire fell several times. That it fell in about from like 234 AD to about 280 AD. There were some big problems. And we'll do another show on that sometime and talk about that. But that was really close to falling. So that was Italy, which finally fell. And once again, fascinating story. I could tell you more about it. Won't do it now. Talking about something else. That fell, the historians say, in 476 AD. The last Roman emperor was Romulus Augustulus, and he handed over his scepter, as it were, to Odovacar, and then Odovacar didn't last long after that. And the whole thing about this is the reason why Odovacar could even be in a position to do what he did. And it's another story. And once again, it's all economics. Remember, we've been talking about economics, and more, we've been talking fundamentally about economics. We've been talking about food. And honestly, that's why Odovacar was there. That's why Attila and all the Huns, that's why they were there. Because they wanted the same, and there's some of them were getting pushed out of the areas that they were in, and they had to go to Rome because they were threatened, and they went to Rome to appeal to Rome to see if they could find a place to live and partake of the economic benefits that Rome provided, which were evident to the people. Just like they're evident now to the people on the southern border and everywhere else for that matter. It's all self-evident. And in 476 AD, it was no less self-evident. So, okay, so you have the first Rome falls in 476 AD. But there's another one that was created, I want to say 330, but it was actually before 330, because the empire was so big, it was so unwieldy, that it had to be, it literally had to have two capitals. And it had different capitals at different times. It had a capital at Ravenna at one time. It had a capital in Milan at another time. I know you didn't know that, but that's the case. But it had a capital at an old city called Byzanton, an old Greek city, Byzanton, on the Straits of the Bosphorus. And that was called Constantinople. Obviously, it was renamed for the emperor at the time, who was Constantine. And that was Constantinople. And that, after the Western Empire fell, the Eastern Empire was still there. It was over there on the Straits of the Bosphorus, Constantinople. And it was entirely strong and entirely powerful and entirely rich. And that was the second Rome. So in 1453 AD, however, the eastern portion of the Roman Empire fell. And it's undoubtedly interesting. I know it is to me. And it's interested me, honestly, since I was a kid, that this empire lasted, because we're talking about a period of time from 753 AD, which is AUC, which stands for Ab Urbe Condita, which Ab Urbe Condita is Latin. It refers to the founding of the city, from the time the city was founded, to 1453 AD. It's amazing. That's something like 20, I'm not going to do the math on it, but that's like 2,200 years. It's amazing. And of course, this is one of the reasons why people look to Rome, why history looks to Rome, because it was this great empire that lasted literally 2 millennia. 2 millennia. So Philotheus said at the time that he was writing, he said the second Eastern Roman Empire had, I don't want to say it had just fallen, but it had recently, in the past few years, it had fallen. And there was this great turmoil, there really was, with people wondering who would stand for Christendom because the Turks took it over. You see, basically not the Arabs, but the Turkish Islamic, it was the Ottoman Empire. It was all Islamic. It was not Christian that took it over. And there was this tremendous turmoil and tremendous concern. What would be the Third Rome? And Philotheus said, You, O great Tsar, you are the Third Rome. And your scepter will not be taken from you, and there will not be a fourth. That's what he said, Philotheus. So what does this mean? I mean, obviously, this is, kind of dramatic in and of itself. But what does it mean? I'll tell you what it means. And it's like, this is like Neo being talked to by Morpheus and saying you can do the red pill or the blue pill. If you do the red pill, you wake up, everything goes back to normal, you forget me, you forget everything. But if you take the blue pill, you get to see how far down the rabbit hole goes. And that's what I intend to tell you. I intend to tell you, and I'm telling you right now, if you continue listening to me, I'm the blue pill. And you will find out how far the rabbit hole goes. But I want you to listen to me no matter what, so just try to deal with that. You don't believe in Morpheus and Neo anyway. But there are points here, so let me not be jocular anymore, but let me make the points. Russia does not see itself as a nation. It sees itself as the successor to empire. Divine, historic, unbroken chain of dominion. The Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, I should say, the Eastern Roman Empire, which people call Byzantine, but there's no more justification to calling the Eastern Roman Empire Byzantine than this old Greek city that had an old name, Byzanton. That's the only justification. And I think it is short shrift indeed. So I just refer to it as the Roman Empire. I refer to it as the Eastern Roman Empire. So the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and then Muscovy, because Muscovy is the real name for Russia. Or you could call them the Rus, or the Ross, which means red. So get this. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and then Muscovy. That hut cluster next to a muddy swamp that became a hellstorm. And with the Third Rome comes expansionism, messianic delusion, eternal grievance, sacred destiny, civilizational superiority. This is why Russia invades. This is why Russia steals. This is why Russia absorbs. It's baked into their doctrine. And Putin, he's not just a product of the KGB, although he certainly is that. And, once KGB, always KGB. He's a true believer in the Third Rome. And that means he will never stop. He will never negotiate in good faith. He will never surrender Ukraine willingly. Because this isn't the geopolitics. This is theology. And right now, the man advancing that theology is a war criminal with nuclear weapons. This is why the West cannot afford moral confusion. This is why Ukraine cannot surrender an inch. This is why Trump's, I don't want to attribute any intent to them because you know how I feel about Trump, but this is why Trump's comments to Zelensky are not merely foolish, they're dangerous. Why not just get along to go along? Just give him Donetsk. I mean, come on, be reasonable. They betray a total ignorance of history. They betray a total detachment from human suffering. They betray the most basic obligation of leadership, to understand the world you're operating in. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back, and we're talking about the Long War, and this is part 4 of the Long War, and welcome to the show. See, this is not conspiracy, it's design. And here's where the abandonment of FDR and his principles, FDR didn't abandon the nation, he passed on to the whatever is the great beyond. He didn't abandon anybody, he fought for this for his whole political life. But after FDR died, slowly, the leaders that arose after him were not as strong. And eventually, people forgot. And the rise of scarcity and the manipulation of media coverage, these all converge. When people are economically unstable, they cling to strongmen. When media amplifies fear, people vote for the arsonist. When corporations profit from division, they invest in chaos. Hello, cryptocurrency, anyone? Speaking of chaos. Derivatives, anyone? Speaking of chaos. A bet on a bet, that's what derivatives are. Chaos, like I said. This is how we got here. Not overnight, not in one election, but over 40 years of deregulation, privatization, union destruction, wage suppression, and political gaslighting. Knuckleheads like Ronald Reagan, of whom it can be said no more than he always memorized his lines and he never missed a mark. But a political giant, he was not. This is the guy who came to the American people, who said the most feared lines in the nation should be, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." And everybody laughed. They thought it was so funny. Well, we'll talk more about Ronald Reagan sometime. We've talked about how he started out as a Democrat. But he fell into the hands of General Electric and its president, a man named Bulgar. And what can I say? He was Bulgarized. Had his head filled with a bunch of stuff. So neoliberalism created the conditions. The media stole the story, and Trump lit the match. Because when you strip the middle class, when you hollow out the working class, when you concentrate wealth at the top, you get exactly one thing. You get feudalism with smartphones. You have the Trilateral Commission, which is... And everybody used to get on me back in the 80s and 90s when I talked about this, that it was a conspiracy thing. There is a Trilateral Commission. There is a Council on Foreign Relations. These are real items. They are the creation, Trilateral Commission is anyway, of David Rockefeller. And from the 1940s and onward, which is about the time that they came to pass, they had as one of their tenets the portrayal, the breaking down of the American industrial system, this mighty system that won the war, it defeated fascism, defeated emperors, put a man on the moon, and created the most powerful middle class than the history of the world had ever seen. And they wanted to split it up. This was their whole idea. And when you tried to talk about it in the 70s and the 80s, well, I wasn't talking about it in the 70s, but I was talking about it in the 80s, nobody believed you. They thought it was crazy, but it happened. And it happened through the instrumentality of globalization. They took 60,000 factories. And let's say that's 60,000 American cities or towns. And they broke them down. Some of them they sold whole cloth. Others of them they just sold in pieces. And all too often, they sold them to our enemies. And they destroyed the industrial heart of America. Because with those 60,000 factories, I mean, think about it. You have cities, you have municipal or county budgets or state budgets, you have school districts, you have the money that has to be paid into those, you have collateral businesses of all kinds. You have grocery stores, you have hardware stores, you have professional people, you have electricians, you have plumbers, you have attorneys, you have doctors, and you name it. This was all destroyed. And that's globalization, and that's what it did. And that comes from the Trilateral Commission. And that was the plan to strip the middle class, hollow them out, concentrate wealth at the top. And that's what happened. So, feudalism with smartphones, that's where I stopped when I got on my screen. And in feudal systems, strong men thrive. And that's the betrayal FDR knew would occur. In 1936, when he talked to the people, he said the bankers and the oligarchs and the money men have fallen off their high seats in the temple, and they have failed. He knew, because he was a rich man. And his own people, because he did this, and because he brought the country back, and because he elevated the middle class, the oligarchs don't want you to be rich. They want to take your money. There's a game. It's called Fallout. It's about apocalyptic America. And in it, if you go through the lore and you read the books, you do kind of get this if you play the games. But if you go through the lore, the history that has been created and contrived, you find out that there's a group called the Raiders. And they're pretty violent. They basically come with their weapons and they kill you and they take your stuff. That's basically the Raiders, and that's what they do. And if you play the game long enough, you find out that these were the rich. And I, Jake, I say to you, that's pretty spot on. And I'm calling it out, and I'm calling it that. And they're still doing it. They're just using stratagem, and they're using duplicitousness, and they're using secret combinations to do it behind your back while you struggle increasingly with difficulty to keep your nostrils above the economic waterline. And you don't have time, and that's why I'm doing the show. Because I know you don't have time to do this stuff. I know you barely have time to listen to me. I certainly welcome you all to the show. But this is what it is. So at this point, let's take a break and we'll be back for the last segment. And this is Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back, and welcome to the show. So I've talked about the fact that there are some dangerous people behind Trump. Trump is a doofus. Trump is a relatively transparent con man. He's a grifter. He's a mentally ill person. He has a mental condition, at least one. And he's probably lapsing ever increasingly into dementia. And you know, dementia is one of those things that doesn't get better. You don't heal from dementia. You've heard of people who have been cured of cancer. They've been cured of leukemia. They've been cured of this thing. They've been cured of that thing. You don't get cured of dementia. It just gets worse. And that's what we're saddled with. So let's talk for a minute about the people who are behind him, and we could talk for a long time. Let's talk about Stephen Miller for a moment, shall we? People don't realize this, but Miller wasn't shaped by Washington. Miller is somewhat of an anomaly. He wasn't even shaped by Trump. He was shaped by his own extremism before he could even drive a car. He would call into radio shows at the age of 14. Jack Elder was one of them, peddling white the guy who ran for governor against Newsom and just literally lost his shirt. Peddling white nationalist talking points, performing outrage, just like it was theater. This isn't new for him. It's his origin story. And Pete Hegseth, our erstwhile Secretary of Defense, and it would be saying too much and crediting him too much to call him erstwhile, the man who told generals their job was to break things and kill people. And oh, by the way, Pete, good work gathering all our generals in one place so that they all might be taken out at one time. Good thinking, moron. This is the man whose actions in the Gulf constitute a possible war crime, precisely because, under the Nuremberg standard that we've talked about, once a combatant is neutralized, killing them becomes murder. Now, I could, go on more. These are the people advising Trump. These are the minds shaping policy. Kevin Roberts, there's another one, talked with Steve Bannon on a radio show in 2024 about Project 2025. Talked about the Second American Revolution. But, it's great, he said. You don't have to worry. It'll be bloodless if the left allows it to be. How about that, everybody? If you allow them to do a Second American Revolution on your butts, you can escape bloodshed. Well, that'll work just fine unless you don't like the kind of revolution that it is. But these are the people advising Trump. These are the minds who are shaping his policies. Trump isn't the danger. Trump's just a doofus with a megaphone. I mean, he's a con man. He's a grifter. He's a 34-time felon. All the evidence point to him being involved with a pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. And he's been put in a position where he has a megaphone because, like I said at the beginning of the show and I've said in other shows, he's like Mikey in the Life cereal commercials. Remember? Remember back in the 60s and the 70s? No one would eat Life cereal. That was the premise of the commercial because it was good for you. And if it was good for you, it couldn't be very good to eat. But then they saw Mikey, this cute little 3 or 4-year-old, something like this. And he was sitting with his head in a hand and there was a cereal bowl in front of him. And they said to each other, hey, let's get Mikey to eat it. Mikey will eat anything. And he ate it and he liked it. Trump is Mikey. The danger, really, it's Trump. Yeah, Trump is the danger, but Trump is being handled, if you take my meaning. Trump is being managed. The danger is the people behind him. The doctrinaires, the technicians, who know exactly what they're doing, who watch all these things, and honestly, who are behind the implementation of them, who understand scarcity, who understand fear, who understand cruelty as tools of governance. And that brings us back to the through line. Scarcity is not an accident. It's a strategy. And that's all the time we have for today. That's the end of our show. Thank you very much for being with me. I very much appreciate you listening, telling other people about it so they can listen too. And we will be back next time at 1 p.m. on Sunday afternoons. The show airs on Saturdays at 12 noon and on Sundays at 1 p.m. And we will see you then, and we will talk about these things more. And this is Politics by Jake.